From Evoke Media, I'm Sabrina Miraj Naeem. With me is Cassia Binkowski, and this is Breaking Glass, a series of conversations with women around the world who are shattering glass ceilings and challenging social norms. They are audacious, gutsy, and their stories are echoed across borders and generations in a rallying cry that is changing the narrative for women everywhere. Before we jump into our conversation today, I want to share an exciting exclusive event our Evoke Media team has been working on. You may recall one of our first episodes features Irish civil rights activist Alva Smith and the documentary she's featured in, The Eighth. This beautifully made film tracks the grassroots fight to overturn one of the most restrictive abortion bans in the world. In advance of The Eighth's official U.S. release, we're hosting an exclusive event on July 13th that you are invited to. You'll have access to watch the film and join us for a timely and pivotal discussion on July 13th at 12:30 p.m. Pacific, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Snag your spot at weareevokemedia.com. Today's conversation is with Sandra Pepera, an expert in international development, democracy, and gender equity. Sandra is the Director for Gender, Women, and Democracy at the National Democratic Institute in Washington, D.C. She works to support women to overcome the barriers to their equal and active political participation around the world.
Sabrina, Sandra's work in equity runs much deeper than these professional accolades. Her parents were born in Ghana before following her father's career as a diplomat to France and ultimately settling in the United Kingdom. She reflects on her family's deliberate choice to invest in access to education and opportunity for girls, as well as her own experience as a Black woman and single mother, and how both have informed her career in international development.
And I love how completely unleashed Sandra was with us today. It's a very global conversation. We're talking tokenism, quotas, politics, and how to engage more men in issues of gender equity. Take a listen. Sandra, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Well, thank you to you both. I'm really excited, and not often that I get asked not to prepare before being interviewed. So
it is our style.
Absolutely. Let's go.
Yeah. So before we jump in, where are you based right now?
Right now, I'm sitting in Washington, D.C., and I've been here for the last nearly 7 years now in my current role as Director of Gender, Women, and Democracy at the National Democratic Institute.
But that's not where you're originally from. Your accent says differently.
Yeah, no, but the accent can lie, you know. It's really, the accent is only a part of the whole story. My parents, I like to call them Gold Coasters. They were from Ghana originally, but very much in that generation that came through the independence movement with Kwame Nkrumah. I have political legacy on both sides of Ghana's basically two-party system. My mother's family all on the sort of liberal side, and my father's family with Nkrumah and socialists. So that's really my heritage. And
how did they get along?
I was going to say, how did that marriage come about?
See, I think it's that thing about being, everybody was bound in the movement for independence. And actually, if you go back to Ghana's independence movement, it was a cross-party movement. It was a multi-party movement. And then, as it turned out, Nkrumah, because he was that charismatic person and he had, you know, the people with him, and he became the first, in first instance, the first prime minister of Ghana, and then eventually the president, and eventually the ex-president, because he was unseated in a coup in 1966. But, you know, really through those first years, from the end of the Second World War through to independence, it was a very multi-party kind of independence movement, as most independence movements were. And then, of course, once you've got independence, now you fight for power like everybody else.
And were you born in Ghana, or you were born in the UK?
More accidents of history. My father happened to be Ghana's ambassador to France. And I always say my mother didn't feel like she was going to be able to give birth in French. So she hopped the channel and went to London, and I was born there. And I say this, I think, with some accuracy, because when my sister was born 2.5 years later, she was born in Paris. And my mother was a linguist. I mean, she was one of those people, she hears a language and she can pretty much speak it almost instantly. She can get in there. Anyway, series of other things happened. In the end, my mother settled. My parents divorced, and my mother settled in the UK. And from then on, I was schooled and raised in the UK. Yeah.
So let's talk about school. I understand that you're second generation in your family with access to education. And we've had so many guests on this show who have reflected on how transformative it was for their parents to value girls' education and to invest in that and prioritize that. Who was that in your family? Who really set the tone and prioritized access to education for girls in your family?
I think it was my grandfather, my mother's father, because he was a district commissioner. We have this great photograph of him, looking like a British country gentleman with a long-barreled rifle and the sort of the soft hat and the jacket and everything in the tropics of all places. But anyway, he saw to it that his daughters, and he had many daughters because he was polygamous, he saw to it that his daughters went to school and insisted that they went to school. So, my mother was born in 1928. I mean, we're talking about a man who was farsighted way back then. And so that set the stone, and girls from then on have been educated. Notwithstanding the fact that my grandmother, his wife, was I call her stone cold illiterate. I mean, in those days, she was married at 16. She was, beautiful and bountiful, but she had no literacy at all. And he was still determined that his daughters would go to school. And so both in my side of the family, both my aunt and my mother finished school. My aunt actually went on to university. And my mother sort of went in and out of thinking that she was going to do more schooling. I think she always knew she could. I remember when I was very young, she was studying law as a mature student in London for a while. But I think she was much more a community worker, and I think she just felt a constant pull between being formally more educated for a profession and doing what she always called was kind of, her office was her kitchen, and everybody came to the kitchen with all sorts of problems and issues, and she was there and supporting them and helping them, and sometimes just laughing at them for their absurdities.
So this is interesting to me. It's a bit reminiscent of another guest that we recently had. Her name is Aminata Conte Bijour, and she's from Sierra Leone, and her father was also polygamous, and she came from a family where the father really prioritized education for the girls, and his wives were not educated. Your grandmother was not educated. And what comes up for me is what was the impetus for your grandfather to place such an importance of education on his daughters and granddaughters, given that that was not the reality of his own family and his generation? I would love to think that it was an understanding of feminist values back then, but do you believe maybe it was more a pride of your family lineage? Is that where it comes from?
I think it was because also, my lineage is Ashanti, so we were right in the middle of the country. And the issue is, of course, those who met the British and the Dutch and the Portuguese and the Swedes first on the coast were educated boys and girls for many more generations than those in the interior. So I think my grandfather, who was, I said, a district commissioner, traveled the whole of the Gold Coast with the work that he did. He just kind of saw that actually other places had better educated populations. And I think he just said, okay, I've got many children, so we're going to educate this lot because this is how this community, this is how Ashanti moves forward with a deeper base of educated